They told me that this was the fashion writer. No, they're polished, but they're lighter. So, my dad has a comment that better to be dead than out of fashion. That's what I told the lady at the manicure. She just looks at me like, okay. She'll use that line, I'm sure. Well, I went with her suggestion. Gonna be an intimate setting, guys. Face to face with the artist. Was this one too? The light? It could well be. But you're at it. Does that have a payload? Is that a name? Again? Or stand up, right? That's the point to stand up. The stadium, China. The bird's nest. The bird's nest. Actually, yeah, it does. Like in the middle of a park.
Already stuff on the wall.
Yes. Woman has pictures of man. Oh. Well, that's Steffen Thomas too.
Look how pretty.
Nourishment, feeding each other.
Picnicking. They're so sweet, little girls.
Target age issues.
Yeah. Nourishment. Picnic.
Outside, outside. Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Well, but these are all women. I see. Yeah. See, this is another idea. So, they're magnets. So you. Yeah. Yeah, we might stick.
Which time do you want to go there?
Seems really good. 6:15.
Okay.
Ink on paper. I was gonna say, that looks like a Steph Thomas. I wasn't able to get much internet connection.
She cut that by hand, it wasn't exactly.
That is wild.
And that hurt.
Lines are so precise.
To take my mask off to cool. Oh, and no, with glasses. Oh, yeah, it almost fogs up mine sometimes. So everybody's here, so we'll start in 2 or 3 minutes. Got all your artists? Yeah, well, we were waiting for the guests here. All the artists are here. One came from Savannah, one came from Columbus, Georgia. And one came from, she's from Alabama, but I think she was in North Georgia, the Heritage Center, and the other one is from Atlanta. And this.
Dayna's from Alabama. She lives in Alabama.
Yeah, but she had been at the Heritage Center. I don't know how long she was up there, but she came, relation from the art, she was here.
I was wondering about the like stand under that, does that make me And it's in a pure.
Oh, yeah.
It's virtuous.
Maybe the baptism. There you go. I'm gonna take a selfie underneath it
There
too.
you go. That's
Yeah, that's what
it
she
is.
wants. She wants people to take a selfie.
Hey, man.
They have figured out how to do it. I haven't figured it out
Join
yet.
soon.
Okay.
And that way we can just like make sure. I did something with Sadie earlier. She said I could hear, she could hear fine or everything, but
Okay.
just like when we get started, if you could join it and like go to my office and just kind of like make sure that sounds okay. And then you just leave. You don't have to like stay on.
And I think I told you that Don is gonna close it out.
Yes, I just gave everybody like a 5 to 10 minute warning.
Okay. Oh, good, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna sit down. When I stand up for hours and hours at this, I've been here all morning.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
See if I can see that. Get these, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I know, I don't either. I'm not a self person.
Get myself. This is a challenge.
Yeah, you have to come forward a little bit. Manage it.
There we go, I got it now.
Got it?
Barely.
Then you can send that to God.
Yes.
Be extra nice.
See, I told you I was an angel.
Yeah, I know you are.
I don't think I would agree with that. Where's my angel?
Oh, that is so sweet.
Would you take it for me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let me go back to. Because I think I'm a little bit too,
Close to
yeah, you
the.
gotta go back some. Just press the white button. Whatever. I'll try to.
Let's see. Gotta switch it over, don't you? So I can see
No,
what's going on.
oh, okay, yeah. Did you do it?
No, I haven't yet. Oh, that.
Thank you. You want one?
Um.
Yes, that's my halo.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you. I'm going to tease Don. Tell him this proves that I am an angel. Picture.
Wow, Dana, what do you think? I think it looks great. You know, in my mind, based on very good.
Oh, I know, yeah, she did say that was
This is your first time seeing anything, maybe?
First
Yeah, because you weren't here for the intro. Wow. How did
Anywhere, anywhere, okay. I'll go over here.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not gonna sit up there. I'm just gonna go.
Yeah, Mia can sit up there.
She's gonna have to, we didn't have another little thing to put in there, so she'll have to pressure bottle. They're corralling.
Oh, they're right outside. Have you been told that? There's the bunch. They can test you for that. I was tested. Yeah. I'm not that. Thank you.
Like a researcher or something.
Yeah, I saw it. You know, we have this photographer and he makes us do all these things. Yeah, makes us do things to like photograph. It's always so. I know, it's like I'm like an author. I know. There was one photographer who was like, oh, I have this great idea to take portraits. He's like, hold this crystal. Like, hold it, and then show like rays of light. Oh my God. I think in publication, but I look like it. Yeah. Like art. That is so funny. What are you talking about? That's really nice. I know, they always make me laugh. Yeah. I know. That's what they say. There's a difference between somebody takes photographs and like your family does. I don't know if Brian will sit down. Oh, what happened to Brian? Whatever that is. I know, I'm thinking of worse. Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Thomas Connor. I'm the interim director of the museum, and I'm also Steffen Thomas's daughter. And for those of you who are new here and don't know this, it was my mother, Sarah Douglas Thomas, that founded this museum and opened it to the public when she was 90 years old. So we don't know if I'm gonna last that long, but I'll be here until I fall over, I guess. I'm pushing along, as they say. I want to recognize our board president, sit right here, Don Roman, and a board member back here, Brian Titus. And so pleased to have everyone here today. I'm going to introduce you to our guest curator, who is Daricia Mia DeMarr. Daricia Mia DeMarr, guest curator of A Feminine View of Brotherhood, is from Los Angeles, California. She came to Georgia to study at Clark Atlanta University, but she received her BA in art history from Georgia State University and a master's degree in visual arts administration from New York University. In 2015, she was invited to curate a special exhibition, Respectfully Yours, at the Queens Museum Boulevard Center with renowned street artist, Lady P. You may have heard of her. Daricia Mia was the assistant director at the New York University Kimmel Center Galleries, where she organized and was curator for over 100 exhibitions in 5 years. So y'all, is our staff listening to that? And she has been a member of the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport Art Program team. So when you go to the airport, you'll see some of her behind the scenes work there. She is also the founder of Pi Arts Project, a visual arts consultancy providing a variety of services from collection management to art programming development. She also works closely with Peg Alston Fine Arts and is the co-founder of Black Women in Visual Art, a social and professional development platform for Black women working in the visual arts spaces. Welcome, Daricia Mia DeMarr. Mia is going to introduce our artists who are here with us today. We're so pleased to have everyone here. And amongst the works that you have created, and we have had people who have come in here and said, oh my gosh, how did they do that? You know, the usual thing. And so we are hoping to hear some of those answers today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone for joining us today for our exhibit. I would like actually the introduction to sort of tie into the exhibition, because when Lisa and Don reached out to me, we talked about Steffen Thomas and we talked about the quote. Okay, yes. So I hope everybody can hear me. I would like to introduce the artist based on the exhibit, because it was, you all were very allowing in your desire to just activate the space and give me autonomy. And I thought about, I'm gonna just read the quote. These are really great, by the way. Lily, thank you. Applause to Lily for our catalog here. So Mr. Thomas, I'm pretty sure everybody is acclimated with his life as an artist and his career, but the feminine view of brotherhood is allowed us to reflect on a mantra that Mr. Thomas had throughout his life. In this world, it's too small for less than brotherhood and too dangerous for less than truth. And I knew that I would like to work with local artists, and these 4 artists came to mind. I've worked with Dayna before, I've worked with InKyoung before. I know Jennifer's work very well and Hannah's work. So we can start with Jennifer. So Jennifer, this is Jennifer Mack Watkins. And Jennifer, I can either read your bio, or would you like to introduce yourself? You go right ahead. Read the bio. Okay, so Jennifer Mack Watkins is a contemporary visual artist whose primary studio practice entails silkscreen, Japanese woodblock, and other forms of printmaking techniques. Her work investigates the societal constructs that can leave women feeling isolated, and she explores definitions of femininity based on widely held notions of beauty and cultural norms. Her artistic aesthetic draws from a confluence of reference points, most of which includes her Mclaughlin printmaking techniques and her culturally rich Southern roots. In 2015, Jennifer was selected to participate in the Mclaughlin Innovation Laboratory Artist in Residence program in Yamanashi, Japan, and was a Joan Mitchell Foundation 2015 Emerging Artist nominee. In the summer of 2021, Jennifer's work was featured in the New York Times, Vogue, Art and Object, Pressing Matters, and Essence. And that's Essence magazine. She is also a recipient of the Elizabeth Catlett Printmaking Award presented by Hampton University Museum. And I'm just gonna take a beat because when I thought about who I would like to have in the space, Jennifer, in her printmaking style and her approach to research and personal and professional development, I just felt immediately interested in what you would come up with for a feminine view and brotherhood. So I was very pleased to have you to join us, Jennifer. And we will talk more about your piece after our introduction. So Hannah Israel lives and works in Columbus, Georgia, USA. She received her Master's of Fine Art and Sculpture at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Her work is across various interests, including sculpture, installation, video, and mark making. Israel has exhibited her work at the High Museum of Art, Zuckerman Museum of Art, the Vargas Museum of Art in the Philippines, Museum of Contemporary Art in Honolulu, iSpace in Chicago, the Kranick Art Museum, among others. She is currently exhibiting a solo exhibition at the Simmons Art Center at Bernal University titled Lucana, the space in between.
That was a while ago.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
Well, you did it.
I did.
You did it. And next, Dayna Thacker. And I guess as we're going through the introductions, I can say Jennifer's work is behind us, and of course it's in the catalog. And Hannah's installation is down on the end of the gallery, and Dayna's pieces are behind us and on the wall to my right. Dayna Thacker, working primarily in cut paper, collage, and installation. Dayna Thacker uses meticulous meditative methods as she investigates thought systems we use to make sense of the world and ourselves, with a particular interest in the overlap of contemplative disciplines and scientific theory. A graduate of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Thacker lived in Atlanta from 2006 to 2014, during which time she was a studio artist at Atlanta Contemporary and a finalist for Atlanta's Forward Arts Foundation Emerging Artist Award. Since mid-2019, she has been living and working in Birmingham, Alabama. Roll Tide. Her work has been included or reviewed in Art Papers, New American Paintings, Arts ATL, Burn Away, and the Atlanta Magazine, among others. Most recently, her work has been included in She Is Here at the Atlanta Contemporary and Private Nature at the Swan Coach House Gallery. And InKyoung, to my right, InKyoung Choi Chun, is that correct? Her work has been included to its permanent collection of High Museum of Art, the city of Atlanta. Oh, and I'm sorry, InKyoung is born in Seoul, Korea, and is a painter living in Atlanta, Georgia. Her work has been included into the permanent collection of the High Museum of Art, the City of Atlanta Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, Fulton County Public Library of Atlanta, Boston Consulting Group of Atlanta office, and numerous private collections. This year, InKyoung Choi had her solo show, Table and Cloud, at Blue Heron Nature Preserve in Atlanta. Participated in the Art Field 2021 in Lake City, South Carolina, Embraces at Yee Gallery of Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn, New York, and a 3-person show at Richardson Family Art Museum of Woodford College, Spartansburg, South Carolina. Chun's new public installation, Rainbow Gateway, Sikdong, curated by Dash, is currently up at the Peachtree Center Plaza in downtown Atlanta. Chun is currently a studio artist at Atlanta Contemporary. Thank you all so much. The halo piece in the corner. And we have InKyoung's work in the house down on the end, a few houses. And I would just like to say, I was really looking forward to how all of these pieces would show together, so to speak, because you all work in a very different medium. And I've heard from the Steffen Thomas staff, as well as others who have visited, that it is very harmonious despite the differences in media. And I think that speaks to this idea of brotherhood that Mr. Steffen Thomas spoke to, because essentially we had to have the conversation about what does a feminine view of brotherhood mean in 2022 for women, where ideas about identity and identity politics are challenged in our 2020 sort of cultural landscape. So we kind of all decided that we think about humankind and what that looks like. So I'm really pleased to see how each of you was able to sort of bring your own personal practice into the space, and it's harmonious together in the way that I feel like Mr. Thomas was hoping for with his mantra. So I don't know if anyone, perhaps Hannah, I'm looking at you because I actually had studio visits with Hannah prior to even being invited to participate in this exhibit. And we were talking about language and the newspapers, because it's interesting. Hannah actually brought 3 different installation pieces together for this exhibit. So can you please share a little bit about that?
Sure. First, I'd like to thank Mia for putting this amazing, diverse, panel and artists in this exhibition. Also, the Stephen Thomas Museum for allowing us to express our own reflection on Stephen Thomas's work, as well as brotherhood and a feminine view. So thank you, and thank you to the board for supporting this amazing. Oh, sorry. Is it muffled? I'm like, sorry.
If there's no objection, is it okay?
Is it okay? I'm pretty healthy right now. I haven't been coughing or anything, and I've been very sheltered, amongst other who are sick. So hopefully you guys come out fairly. So thank you for suggesting that, because I always have a hard time projecting. So I'd like to thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, it means a lot. Yeah, and it's been so, it's great. And this is a wonderful town too. I was just telling my husband who came down with me what amazing time we've had since the second time that I came back here. So yeah, this is the work that I have in the exhibition is comprised with three pieces that I've had in the past from other installations. And part of that was the conversation that Mia and I had about what does it really mean to have this point of view, of a feminine view in today's world about brotherhood. And a part of the thing that comes from my work is really about communication. And I think it spurred off from the newspaper piece, because at the time the number of newspaper that's part of this exhibition is from oh my goodness, what year was it? 2015. And so the newspaper is about that time period, right? And what's happening in that world, in our world at that time. And so,
And aren't they from both Filipino and American?
it's a mixture of all this information that's
Okay.
coming through in my periphery, you know.
Okay.
So the difference between text-based that are in as objects versus something that we have in our phone, and the way we capture that information is really different. And the other part of the text that's part of this series that's different from the other installations I've had was I included recipes from, I collect recipes, and I found recipes. And so there's a recipe book and a box that I found from my many years of going into thrift store, or like, you know, people giving me things. And recipes to me, and also this idea of food and sharing, is something that also that comes into this idea of sharing language and sharing this sense of kinship and kindredship. And a lot of us, for me, for example, growing up at home and being taught these values of being, you know, what a human kind would be, was always done through the table. A table where people, we share our experiences that day, our troubles, our, you know, insights of the world. And so I thought that this connection between language of the everyday from the outside the world and language within the context of food kind of puts together this nice notion of an assembly. And I think that was one of the things that really how we started this conversation.
The table, this
Yeah.
like sense of the human table, that we all want to have a seat at that table, and to be able to communicate how we're feeling, what we need, what's bothering us, you know, like it speaks to that. And food also being one of, I would say, one of the few things that everyone can agree on. We like eating food, we like music, and we can all perhaps sit down and experience those things together. And it also has this sort of feminine, domestic, you know, historical relevance as well.
Right.
And
Like,
that speaks in InKyoung.
yeah, but going back to
yeah.
home and learning about all the things that I've learned in cooking was through my grandmother, and how it's passed down from her mother to from her grandmother. And those sensibilities that we learn from that a maternal,
Exactly.
matriarchal hierarchy gives us a sense of being in, you know, what our, you know, part is in this world. And I think that's part of some of the things that I think about femininity. It's the strength of sharing through the things that we feed in our mouth, like, you know, and a lot of the I don't know if you guys have ever heard of pie socials. And growing up in Pennsylvania, a lot of our churches would have these, and I think they have it everywhere. Churches are really this sort of a community base where people come in and bring food. And they bring food, and part of the time when the immigrants would come from different places, they might have different language, but through food, they were able to communicate and become part of a community because that notion of sharing is so much easier when they find commonality between what the ingredients are, or how they get engaged with, wow, we've never used that spice before, and so there's these connections that you can make.
And the conversations that happen in kitchens and at tables and over the preparation of meals, it's like that's where recipes are shared and conversations are had, gossiping, some of these things that are very closely tied to with womanhood, and what that means. And it just immediately shifts me to InKyoung, because InKyoung and I have had several studio visits years and years ago, and she always has sort of looked at this, or has, every time that we've spoken in her studio space, there's always been this idea of home and the house, the shape of the house, the shape of the windows, the things that are happening in the house at the table. I remember in the last exhibit, the toast at the table for breakfast that you like to have with your daughter. So you want to share a little bit in telling about?
Yes. Hi, my name is InKyoung Choi, as Mia introduced me, and thank you so much all the staffs at Steffen Thomas Museum and Mia. Thank you so much for inviting my work. Such an honor to be part of this amazing women artists. So as you see, I'm an immigrant. I came from Seoul, South Korea about 30 years ago, right after getting married to American citizen, and I just came here. And then I felt, sometimes still I feel a little foreign, and then being living in the United States a little bit challenging sometimes. So I felt like securing my own space or thinking about really intimate, welcoming space is really important. So whenever I feel a little bit lonely and then challenging from outside, then I wanted to create art which gives me like a warmth and comfort. So I started that idea, and then I pushed the idea through my work. So when you see my work from there, that like Hannah mentioned about from her work, she's talking about table and then like exchanging energy. So here again, my house has little tiny green apple, and then the pink is like me, myself. So it's extremely symbolic that I went one residency and then overseas last 3 years ago, 2018, right? And then it was winter time, and then that residency program didn't have a lot of fruit because it was a winter time, and then they only served me an apple or cookie for dessert. So I ended up having green apple, like 1 or 2 green apple every day, and then it was everywhere in my studio. And then one curator from Georgia, she called me, and then could you create one like some house, plexi house, using some of your idea. So I want to make a really simple house, but symbolically, I just want to talk about just relationship, me and green apple, because it was all about that moment, and it was nighttime, long night and winter residency program, and then just creating art. So just symbolically just eating one green apple and me, and then night just like with the bright yellow star. So it's like symbolic like a window at nighttime, and then that's about it. So sometimes my work, when you look at my watercolor and then another painting, is extremely complex and a lot of imagery happens. But sometimes I want to be really restful and make a really minimal work. So I really shift my work style from really a lot of imagery painting with one work, and then okay, I need to take a break from that a lot of image. So I make really simple sculpture house. And then I need to take a break from painting or 2D work. That's why I created those like a sculpture neon public art. So I move on from work, like a lot of 2D sometimes. Most time I'm a painter. So I create painting, and then while painting, I need to think about something a little bit different and something more public, because I realize the painting always stays inside of a gallery and then inside the museum. And then as an artist, I want to go further. So I always some collect idea and then do the memo. And then when there is a call, like a public art call, then I just propose my idea. So that's why I ended up making the neon sculpture for public art. And then sometimes it goes beyond. So that's why I was making the installation for the huge staircase, glass staircase with the dash people. That it's more like a painting imagery, but it's clear plastic vinyl image. So we wrapped entire glass staircase with using my painting image, and then it's kind of like a sun hitting, and then all those light is kind of coming across, and then it's reflecting. So yes, so it's about starting home, being home, and then making sure I am very stabilized, and then I'm welcoming, and then talking about serving, like sharing each other, and then from there I just created more houses and houses. So when you get to small houses, then small house means that what is about home? So home is about creating your own intimate object, right? So sometimes I create apple, my own green apple, and then sometimes that your own artwork, right? Your grandchildren's artwork, or your own plant, or your own like meal. So when you have your own some object or poetry or music or your lover, that makes your place home, right? So that's why I created a little small house with the plexiglass, and then I inserted sometimes like a doodling. So one painting is like about families, all about just doodling. I don't want to make a really nice like master painting like Picasso. I'm not that able, but sometimes the doodling means about any type of art, not just like a woman artist and real professional artwork. Your 3-year-old kindergarten, preschool children, they can create incredibly beautiful drawing, right? And then parents are so proud of your child drawing and then they are always like talking about framing their own children's work, right? So that symbolic work makes your home. So that's why I made some doodling type of drawing and painting.
And those are in the small houses.
Right.
Okay.
So, that was my meaning, and then my goal is I want to make that houses a lot. Like every year I try to make like 12, 13 houses, and then in the end my goal is making 100 houses. And then I try to find
Place for them.
Right. But somehow I need to sell because people just they offer. Can I just purchase like 1 or 2 houses, and then but I have to sustain myself as an artist. So I sell like 4 or 5 houses, and then so my number always stays like between like 16 houses. I keep adding like 12 houses every year. So it's a dilemma. It's a problem, but it's still good things because someone is collecting my work, and then they are cherishing my work in their places.
So a house within a house.
Yes.
A house within a house. And it's, I would say too, from your houses to these very intimate, kind of domestic, familiar shapes and spaces, it makes me think about Dayna's work, because Dayna Dayna has this very cosmic view of the interconnectedness of all of us. And I was just really fascinated. I worked with Dayna on a previous exhibit, and I'm like, Dayna, what are you doing? What is all of this? And she's like, oh, theoretical physics and Buddhism. I was like, what? Can you please explain that? So again, this common thread of connectedness in these different spaces, and it was a perfect segue because it's this sort of micro macro. So to go from the micro intimate space to the sort of macro cosmic space. Tell us about theoretical physics and Buddhism, Dayna. And the word
Well, as it happens, this particular series is a lot of the, well, my driving force with all of my work really is this idea of how contemplative traditions, and I shy away from the word religion, even though that is encompassed in many contemplative traditions, but I'm less interested in the rituals and strictures of religion as I am the insights and the benefits that many people get from the more contemplative traditions in all religions. And a lot of the wording that people use when they describe these traditions is eerily similar to the wording that well, I won't say actual physicists, it's the physicists who are writing for lay people like me who can't actually understand what one physicist might say to another physicist. But some of them are generous enough to write these amazing books that explain the world as best they can to the rest of us. And the wording is just, it strikes me over and over again how similar it is between the contemplative traditions of Buddhism and Islam and Christianity, and so much of more theoretical physics. So this particular work is actually looking at the sacred geometry of Islam and the use of these patterns, which if you've ever seen images of mosques and Islamic interiors, they're everywhere. And the idea is that they do make up they are the foundation of our existence. It's kind of a bit of a molecular structure, if you will, except that these are the thoughts of God, and they imbue us all. And the idea being that if you follow the lines of the thoughts of God back to the central point of Allah, then well, that's the goal, right? So then you have string theory in theoretical physics, and string theory came about with trying to marry the ideas of particle physics and quantum physics. The particle physics is the stuff that we can observe, well, with a microscope. It is the stuff that we are more acquainted with in our regular lives. Quantum physics is this seemingly every law breaking, every theory breaking world of the tiniest bits of our universe, and the energy that makes it all work. And yet they don't seem to work together, these two worlds of physics. And so string theory is one theory of how those two things might work together. And oddly enough, the idea of these strings and the description of how they resonate through the universe
universe in order to create everything that we see and are is very similar to the descriptions of the sacred geometry within Islam. So that's a summary of the work.
I'm really interested in how you're gonna tie that up. I've been waiting.
Well, it's really beautiful because Jennifer and I met like casually, and it was like I happen to also be an artist. And then I would say, Jennifer, I was at Spelman Museum. I mean, not Spelman, CAU. And the first thing I see when I walk into the museum is your work, and I'm like blown away because I'm like, I know this girl. She's got work here at the university. And so I became more acclimated with Jennifer as an artist. And Jennifer is also very much interested in research and history and the connections of things. And specifically with this series and in her other series, really looking at the individual, the woman, the girl, and where we stand in terms of how we feel about ourselves, how we are seen by others, and how that affects how we see ourselves. I hope that's a good overview, Jennifer, but also just, and I'll return to this thought, but go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, so basically this work is a new body of work, and I kind of see them as studies because like usually most of the work I've been making lately have been Japanese with block, and I did silk. A job here, and I had things lined up. I didn't have like things. I wasn't worried. Like I knew I had did the work prior, and so I knew that I saw this as an opportunity to see myself as going into a new terrain and what tools I had to be able to navigate in a totally new different environment. And so basically, as an open letter to my daughter, she was talking about oh, I have to meet new friends, and like she's 5, they're going to the 5-year-old kindergarten thing, and I had to talk to her how do you meet friends, how to introduce yourself, and how to just be yourself. And like if things are challenging in school, you don't give up, you keep trying. And so I thought about take aim, shoot. And I said, you know what, things are challenging, but if you keep your eye on, you want to get better, you want to learn, you want to continue to learn, then you have to have a target, and you have to keep that target and focus. And so I decided to make the work that you see on the left hand side. The nourishment was more like taking a breather, like when things are getting to be overwhelming and you're not quite sure, it's always remember to like think about things that make you feel comforted, which for me is food. Anybody would be comforted with food, but for me, I call it nourishment because I think food isn't always like the physical of eating and the act of eating, but I think food can be anything of coming together with like-minded people, not kind of tied into the whole like quote of brotherhood and just coming together with like-minded people with a common goal and a common interest. And I was really interested in like looking more deeper into like what does sisterhood look like historically. So I started looking more into like the only thing I knew. I had two brothers. I didn't have any sisters, but I knew that the first thing that came to mind was like, wow, I was a Girl Scout. So let me like do some investigation. And little did I know, Juliet Lowe, right? She started Girl Scouts in Savannah. And so I was like, wow, this is meant to be. So I started delving deeper, and then I started thinking about like the actual activities that the girls would do, continue to do today that bring them together as sisters. And so basically, I thought about like target practice, archery, cooking, building, all these things are supposed to bring skills and confidence to the girls who were in it to receive their patches. Or now, we sell cookies now. But I think they get patches for that too. But all that to say is that I wanted to think about all the different ways of how I want my art to develop confidence into my daughters when she sees my work, no matter if it's like a big work or a small work, or a doll that's staring straight at you, a doll that's crouching down. When I saw this, she's like, oh my gosh, she's one of my biggest fans. And so I wanted her to be motivated by the work that I created. So I thought ideally like just really like Girl Scouts, and like I thought about that, and I started looking more into like when I was in Finland. I finished this work. I just completed my residency, my first residency in the States at Finland in North Carolina, and I made these there. And so I kind of they came back like I printed a little bit, and I cut some into this cut paper involved. There's silk screening involved in there, and I just wanted to make sure that I could tie in like my influence of the space. Being in Finland, I was there for 2 weeks, and there's a lot of mountains, a lot of land, a lot of snow, and so I really wanted to tie that nature aspect into it. And so I'm really happy to be in this show, and hopefully you will enjoy looking at this works together.
It's really flowing, and I think after hearing Dayna speak about the thoughts of God, and then looking at InKyoung's halo, and thinking about how that they speak to each other, it's really lovely. I didn't know, Andy or Lisa, do we have what's our sort of timetable? Do we want to answer questions, or?
I think that would be great. We're not only strict
Okay.
time, so I think that you can might have some questions.
Okay.
I would like to, sitting listening, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing these intimate details about your work, which explains a lot. So this will help us as people visit the show, and also it all begins to make so much sense. One little story I want to tell you about Steffen Thomas. He did these scenes over and over, like the spring supper, the painting over here, but families eating together over and over. And this was, he had a ritual that he brought from Germany from his father, where if we had some kind of celebration, like he got a new commission for a work of art, and we were going to be able to eat for a few more months, so he would, and this is just the German thing. This was a long time ago, and he had to drive to Atlanta to a delicatessen and buy some Limburger cheese. That's a really strong German cheese, and beer, and pumpernickel bread, and bring it home, and we would all sit around the table together. And my mother was so much a part of this. She was such a huge influence on my father, and they were a team. But he would train us from a very early age to eat Limburger cheese, because if you've ever had it, it's a very strong cheese. And he would take a little piece of pumpernickel bread, he would cut it off of a big loaf, and put a little bit of butter and then a little bit of Limburger cheese, these little pieces, and pass it around to everybody. And we were allowed, even as children, we had tiny little beer steins. So we were part of the celebration, and we would have our little bitty beer and our little piece of Limburger cheese. And all of us, all of my siblings just love Limburger chicken. Nobody else likes it, but except Germans. And all of this that you're talking about, home and eating together and sharing meals, sharing all these things makes so much sense and fits so well in this museum. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to direct the questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
And
do we have some questions from the audience here? One right
Yes,
here.
hi there. Thank you so much for sharing. When I first saw the title of Feminine View of Brotherhood, I was confused because when I see the word brotherhood, I think of sisterhood, I think of worldhood in the same way that when I see the word God, I think of good. So that's my perspective, my worldview. And I feel like it's interesting, and I don't know if this might even be directed, but I love the idea of the tenderness that you've all described, even string theory, which has its own tenderness. And even in Islamic art, which I know has no depictions of the human form, correct? And yet, you know, your images are very feminine. Not to get too there, maybe another glass of wine, but I'm thinking these days about what you said, you know, in terms of sharing at the table, sharing energy, sharing history, sharing food, sharing vulnerabilities. I'm concerned these days about cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation. And I wonder if any of you as artists have any comment on that, because I don't, like I'm wearing a turquoise necklace right now, because I love turquoise and it's my stone. Would that be, my daughter would say, you can't wear that, you're not a Native American. She's a drag, but it's not. So can you talk about that a little bit? Is that too much of a hot topic? Because I'm very interested.
It's not a hot topic to me. I think it speaks to the conversations that I've had with all of them about feminine view of brotherhood. Like, what is this? How do we, what does that mean in a moment where identity politics and, like you're talking about, these conversations that there was no place for them really? I would say maybe in the last century or so, half a century. Definitely not in the time of your father. No one would ever think to ask the question of, you know, what is your pronoun? You know, so I think it sort of falls in alignment with that. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in, but I think that it is a slippery slope, because when you think about things like jewelry or music or fashion or style, opposed to perhaps like some other things with maybe language, or although if you go to any continent or country and you speak the language, you're received with open arms. So I would say that it just, I think for the most part, would depend on the object or the idea or the action. But I think it's fine for anyone to wear. I don't think that turquoise belongs to anyone. You know, I don't know. Anybody? Jennifer?
Yeah, I think a lot of things are running through my mind. I think, like, even for me, like as a Japanese woodblocker, I'm not Japanese, right? But I have been there. I respect the culture. I have researched. I think for me is knowing how to just be respectful of like what has happened presently, what's happened presently in that area, what's happened historically, what are some of the challenges, and how did the artist use that medium during that time? And I think it's just educating yourself by researching and not just like, oh, I'm wearing this turquoise. Well, what does turquoise look like in Egypt? What does it look like in Charleston? What does it look like in Philippines? What does it look like in Hawaii? Like just knowing like how does that transfer and how does that look differently and how is it used and the purpose and who used it? And you know, on all that, I think kind of comes into understanding how I see, because I'm definitely an advocate of like making sure that you understand where things come from and knowing how that might change in your different parts of the world. And going over to Japan, like it was a crazy time. So I remember that time was when it was a really horrible shooting that happened in Charleston, and then it was in the news. And they're like, I was only U.S. Person that came from to this residency, and they're like, did you hear what happened? And I was like, whoa. And I feel like just knowing like now I'm an outsider, like now I'm not in the States, and now I have to describe like how am I American, and like how these things affect me, how do I feel about it in representing my whole country, and my culture. And I think like just using Japanese was like as a way to like, I don't want to culture appropriate anything, but I definitely want to be aware of like the history. And also with the Girl Scouts of America, like they could be like, wait, they're putting this here, but like I had to my research. Oh wow, I didn't know a Girl Scouts was founded in Savannah, but if I just said like I'm gonna just do Girl Scouts and just do these images, but I had to know the history of where it came from and how it wasn't until 1917, it's found 1912, how 1917 when there was like rooms for African American girls to be part of this, and then it wasn't until 1950. And so it was a way to desegregate. They had segregated, troops and stuff. And so then I remember I found another troop, like everything just kind of goes in like other strings of information. And I found out that Dr. Martin Luther King said that Girl Scouts was going to be the way to end racial segregation and bring people together. There was a quote that he said that. I was like, wow, this is crazy. And I started going deeper and I said, wow, what is archery? Who did archery? So I typed in archery. Well, this does not look that verse, but I know everybody did archery, but how can I find information, and just the fact that there were segregated camps. I'm like, wow, you're gonna segregate play, so it's just like, I was like, wow. So all these, one thing happened from another, from the Brotherhood, typing it in and seeing like, okay, this is Brotherhood. Well, I'm not gonna do this, but I'm gonna try to see how I can just take the strength of being a woman and put a target and shoot as a title for my prints. And then like I said, I could show the softness by taking some Japanese papers and making them out of the dresses. And so you just try to find ways to make sure you are always knowing where the reference is coming from and being respectable and not just taking something and not knowing where it comes from. And just how that fits into present and modern.
If I could add to that, it might be helpful for people to understand how it is that the board came, or the museum came to select this topic. I would begin first by making sure that everyone understands just how critical and central the concept of brotherhood was to Dr. Thomas. He spent a lifetime promoting that concept. And in today's age, as you've indicated, when the museum community has moved toward more advancing more diversity, more inclusion, more equity, it was important to us that we look at that concept of brotherhood from other perspectives. For those of you who've been active the last 3 years and or more in the museum's programming, you'll see that we've been working hard to promote themes that were important to Steffen. We invite you, when you leave, please spend time in the main museum and the main gallery, and you will see Steffen's strong embrace of women as the foundation of the family and therefore society writ large. The same for Black folks. You'll see a certain touch, I feel personally, to how he expressed his view of Black people who were a marginalized people, certainly in 1930, 1926, when he first arrived here in the country. And yet, when you learn his history, you'll find that he embraced the opportunity to engage with African Americans, to paint them, to include them in his studio practice and to develop relationships. You learn that he was had a very active long term relationship with George Washington Carver. So fast forward to today. It is critically important that we get the other voices into that conversation. Black folk, women, we hope in the future, please stay tuned, that we will be exploring the concept of an LGBTQ view of brotherhood, a Native American view of brotherhood. All of those are fascinating concepts that the art community is very well placed, very well positioned to explore and to bring to us a greater understanding, certainly more diverse voices.
Thank you so much. I actually, as I was making some of the new prints I did talk to some of my students who are non-binary and trans in relationship to what brotherhood means today. You know, if they felt included in that terminology. And one of the pieces I titled Themhood, and because now everyone refers to they them as a way to explore that possibility of the whole togetherness, you know, being in one umbrella. And it's really interesting in coming to this notion about femininity. You know, growing up, I was always like this kind of tomboy, and I never really sort of identified what that was, because to me, my sister was the beauty queen, and I was the kid who had scars all over her knees and who never was allowed on the beauty queen contest. And she probably is watching right now, and she's probably saying, "Yeah, you're right." But you know, this notion about gender is something that also came up on my mind, and what that means. You know, coming to a more growing up in a matriarchal family unit where it was really highly influenced by my grandmother and mothers growing up, and my aunts. You know, it was really interesting where you find that notion between what a brotherhood and sort of the idea of femininehood.
Yeah.
Or if there should be, you know.
It's fascinating to me because when I think about any type of like nurturing or caring or tenderness, it's like brotherhood just doesn't come to mind. You know, like Jennifer
and through architecture, that was really conceived. Like I felt that I belonged there, even though I was a foreigner, because there's something about the pattern. Americans to the Philippines and growing up with this sort of identity within somebody that comes from somewhere else, and feeling like I belong in that society as well, and the home. Like I think there's something about